comes on.
Now it is. Maybe I wasn't pushing the right thing. Okay. Great. Good morning. Welcome to the first Fiscal Management Committee meeting of the 2019-2020 school year. I'm happy to call our meeting to order. And at this time, I would like to introduce my colleagues on the board. I'm Jeanette Dixon, the chair of the Fiscal Management Committee, and we'll go in order of seniority.
Oh. I'm Judy Dock, a member of the board, and I apologize, but I thank you for waiting. But I was in Damascus for their 44th annual flag-raising event, and it just takes a while. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Good morning, board member Brenda Wolf, District 5.
Great. And we will go around the table.
Good morning, Ms. Dixon. Andrew Zuckerman, Chief Operating Officer for MCPS.
Great.
Good morning, Arazal Abad, representing the Office of School Support and Improvement, Chief of School Support Improvement, Dr. Statham.
Great. Thank you.
Becky Gibson, Board of Education Office Staff.
Robin Seabrook, Director, Governance, Policy, and Community Relations, Board Staff.
Great. And Robin, I want to thank you for staffing us this morning. Laura Christina Webb, our Chief of Staff, who generally staffs the committee, is on jury duty today, doing her duty. So just moving forward, we have 2.1. The informational summary for May 6, 2019. Colleagues, do you have any changes you'd like to make with that? No? Okay. All right. And 3.1, the Office of the Inspector General report on Montgomery County Public Schools telework program. Great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Dixon. As our team from the Office of the Inspector General comes to the table, I just want to remind everyone that in January of 2018, I believe, February 2018, my years are getting mixed up here, the Board of Ed authorized 2 performance audits for the Inspector General to do of MCPS. The first one had to do with our workers' comp program, and you heard an update on that at your May meeting, and we are coming back to you in October with our action plan. And at the same time, you also authorized a performance audit of the telework program for MCPS. And so I'm pleased that our colleagues at the Inspector General's office are here. Our new Inspector General, Megan Davey Lamarzi, is with us, as well as Molly Habermeyer, and I'll turn it over to them. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Megan Davey Lamarzi. I am the new Inspector General for the county.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us this morning to present some of the highlights from our recent report. Ms. Habermeyer handled the report. I'm going to turn it over to her in one second, but I look forward to meeting all of you and the other members of the board and continuing this relationship that has been started under Mr. Blansett. So thank you again for having us.
Great.
Good morning. I'm Molly Habermeyer from the Montgomery County Office of the Inspector General. I'm here to talk about the telework performance audit we did. Our objective was to see, does MCPS have an effective telework program? Is it following the laws and policies? There are not a lot of MCPS employees who telework. It was 254 were approved in the time period we were looking at. That is mostly the administrative workforce, people like accounting people who work in information technology. The teachers are, their hours are not tracked as teleworking, even though they do some work from home, say on a teacher work day. They might be working but not at their assigned workplace, but they were not in that group. Board of Education members were also not in that group, and we know that Board of Education members also will do work from a remote place, which is what telework is. The data we looked at was from 2017 and 2018. MCPS provided us with that data on who was teleworking, what the job titles were, what the hours were when the teleworking happened. To evaluate the telework program, we did some research to see what are recommended practices in other organizations. We had a number of examples from the federal government departments, from Maryland, nearby local governments. I looked to see were there performance audits of telework in other school systems, and didn't find any. I contacted some other inspector general offices. They thought it sounded like an interesting idea, but they hadn't done it. There were some general audits of school systems that did sometimes mention that telework was going on. And they mentioned a couple practices, but mostly the controls that we identified were from government departments. Once we identified the controls, then we looked to see, okay, is MCPS doing these things? And we looked at the data, we reviewed MCPS's policies, and most of those were in regulations. And we interviewed MCPS employees, and we focused on employees who were teleworking the most and their supervisors. So we identified 10 key controls, and the overall summary, MCPS had implemented them. There were a couple controls that we found could be improved, and we also thought there were possibly opportunities to expand the telework program, and that it could be useful to improve the training of supervisors on how to supervise teleworkers. And we did not find any evidence suggesting that the program was not in compliance with the internal policies or the laws. So this chart shows who was teleworking the most at MCPS. So you can see the job titles on the left there, and then the hours column is the total number of hours teleworked in that time period we looked at. And you can see consulting teachers put in the most hours, and yes, those are teachers, whereas you can see the other people on the list are mostly in those administrative categories I mentioned before.
Could I ask you, I'm
Yes.
sorry, to go through and read the list for those that are working at home? Who
okay.
teleworks the most? MCPS.
Okay, well,
not MCPS.
consulting teachers telework the most, and they are teachers who observe other teachers in their classrooms. So they don't have their own classrooms, they're observing other teachers, and then they write reports about how those other teachers might improve. So their report writing is done teleworking.
Right.
The other categories, to read them for people who can't see this easily: information technology systems specialists, information technology systems engineers, communication specialists, application developers, technical analysts, data integration specialists, psychologists, instructional specialists, coordinators, a coordinator of GIS services, a fiscal specialist, and accountants.
Great, thank you.
So these are the 10 key control areas we looked at in terms of like what are recommended practices. So it's recommended that supervisors of people teleworking set objectives, deadlines, and reporting requirements. It's recommended that teleworkers' performance should be measured the same as if they were not teleworking. There should be written policies. There should be training that's required for employees to telework and for the managers of the teleworkers. There should be criteria for what should be at the telework work site, and that should be in writing, and the people teleworking should have to certify that they do it. Things like you need a computer, you need to be accessible in some way, maybe telephone. There needs to be, or it's recommended that there be a mix of telework and office days so that the teleworkers do come into the office and there's work that they can do in collaboration with other people in the office. They're not always teleworking. That agreements be, telework agreements be in writing, make clear to everybody what's expected. That the organization collect data on the telework hours. That technology controls should be in place, rules on accessing the computer system, the data, and that approvals for whether people can telework or not should be, excuse me, based on clear written standards. And we highlighted the ones at the bottom here because even though MCPS was doing something in all these areas, we had some recommendations for the bottom too. Our first finding, we were looking at, there were possibly some other benefits that MCPS could be capturing from telework. There are other organizations that could point to, say, reduced real estate costs because they didn't need as much office space, or they could continue operations in severe weather. These were just possibilities that we thought maybe MCPS might be able to look at. We did hear about that there might be an ability to improve training for the supervisors. We did hear in our interviews that there are some supervisors who are somewhat reluctant about allowing telework. And then there were other supervisors who were very comfortable with it. And we thought that it might be useful for the ones who were comfortable with it to be able to convey to the others how better to monitor the people, make sure they're working, or make sure they know they're working. The technology finding had to do with data security. And we did find MCPS had a lot of technology policies that were very good. We talked to people at Montgomery County to find out what are the county's rules, to have something to compare to. Excuse me, and there were a couple rules that the county had that we thought would be good for MCPS. One is to prohibit the copying of certain data onto employees' own computers, and another was to require people to inform MCPS management if the equipment they had that had any MCPS data on it was lost or stolen. We heard some people think that possibly the decisions for who could telework and how many days a week and how many hours a week, we heard that some people thought that those could be clearer. So we recommended that they should be clearer and put in writing, so then everyone would understand, why wasn't I allowed to telework, or how come I can't telework all the days I want, or why does this person get to telework and that one doesn't, to make it clear to everybody. And if it is clear to everybody, people perceive it as more fair. And do you have any questions or concerns you want to discuss about that?
Questions, Jim?
No, I don't really have questions, but in reading this, you're right about the policy needs to be written out so people know, because I noticed in here, one supervisor said you have to live out of state before you can use teleworking. And so I think that's the kind of thing we really have to clear up, and the training for the supervisors probably is a good idea.
No, exactly. That was an example where someone didn't understand the policy. Right, and that wasn't the policy, but there wasn't enough information in writing for the person to know.
Okay. Brenda?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
One of your recommendations was to prohibit copying, which makes perfect sense, but how do you manage that? So I wanted to know, is it possible to put something into the system that actually prohibits you from being able to download and copy it to something else? In other words, you know how you go on some sites, you can look at the data, you can manipulate the data, but you cannot download and copy it. Can we do that? Do you know whether we could do that?
So we can look at that. I'd have to talk to our technology folks about the type of stuff we're talking about might be a Word document or a PDF that might get saved to a flash drive and transferred over to a personal computer. I think is sort of the type of idea you're talking about. So we can certainly look to see what our technology capabilities could be in the future.
Well, what I was talking about was a little bit different. I was thinking, and I don't know who, I saw your list of who works at home, but I came from the federal government, so almost a lot of positions could work at home, and some had a higher level of security to get into the system. So you could get into the system from your house, but you could not do anything but do your work in that system, and nowhere could you copy or download it. So let's say personnel. If I'm doing personnel stuff and I have access to your social security number, whatever, I could go in and maybe do something, fix your time, do a lot of other things, but I couldn't download any of your information to anything else. That's what I'm talking about.
So
I mean, just doing a document,
Sure.
I understand that people might, think that putting it on a flash drive is harmless, but
Well, my understanding is MCPS does have permission-based access by user, and I think as you're developing detailed policies to put in writing, you could decide who should get access to what.
And Molly's right. I mean, we do have that spelled out. And one of the things I want to look at as the next step is just to what extent do we have everything that you're talking about spelled out in our technology user agreements that haven't necessarily migrated over to the telework policy. But if you're an employee of MCPS and you have authorization to use VPN, for example, at home, that you've signed the form that we all have signed and accept all the responsibilities that come with it. So we can do that crosswalk, and we can look at the security feature that you're talking about that's sort of independent of teleworking. If you have VPN access at home and you're working on a Saturday, for example, if you're a principal doing observation reports at home, which is not uncommon, what can get blocked from saving to a personal device? So that's a good question, and we can investigate that.
well, I really appreciate your work on this. I know that having been a past manager, it's a little bit uncomfortable when you first start talking about teleworking for people, but we find out that it actually works. People get more accomplished at home because they don't have the social aspect of work. So I do think that training could be beefed up for people to see and talk about that and share their experiences. And I would like to see us send this to, what do we have to do? Send it back to policy?
Mhm.
What did you say, Becky? We send it to policy to have them look at where we need to beef up our policies on this. I don't think that it's major issues, but I'm sure we could do some work on it. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, we will refer it back to the policy committee. So, I'm intrigued by this and wonder what you think about it. And by the way, the board, at least since I've been here, the almost 3 years, I think we haven't had complaints or, concerns about teleworking. But, I would suggest that, a lot more is done in terms of teleworking. You could even say the teachers telework in terms of all of the work that they do at home, during various times, whether it's during the summer, in the evening, when school is out and, things of that nature as well. I don't think we've ever tried to capture that because it's probably uncapturable. But, I think it's a good option that we have for staff. And, we will refer it back to the policy committee. And I don't know, maybe just in terms of communication, Ms. Wolf is our new chair of our communication committee, but, might be nice to put out something there that this option is available. What do you think about that? Putting out something to let staff know that this is available, just a reminder, or do you like everybody at work? What do you think, Dr. Zuckerman?
I wasn't sure if you were talking to me.
I'm talking to anybody who's here.
Yeah,
actually.
no. Yeah, we can expand the communication. I think that there are certain positions in any organization that lend themselves well or better to teleworking than others. So, for example, if you have a position that requires reception level type of service, customers coming or parents interfacing on a daily basis, that's harder to telework than if you are a IT software developer who might spend 8 hours in their office here by themselves. They can also do that at home. So we can continue to look at ways to communicate it. I think there's real value in the finding around supervisor training. It's something that Lance Dempsey and I have discussed. I think we can. And you're absolutely right. There are examples of teleworking all the time. I think the difference here is formally doing it as a function of your duty hours and your everyday responsibilities, and having a schedule and an understanding with your supervisor of if there's going to be a meeting, you understand that you need to be face-to-face or in a video conference. So there's a lot of opportunity here. Interestingly, I would say, and you would probably know better than me, this regulation that we developed here back in 2006 emerged out of, at that time, the county executive's call for telework across the county to reduce traffic congestion. It was actually less at that time about employee productivity and benefits to the organization as much as it was to the county. And I could be wrong about this, but I think we were the first adopter of teleworking, and it took a number of years before the county government, and it was only recently, even like a year or two ago, that the county government even implemented a telework policy. So here we are doing a performance audit of hours 13 years later, 12 years later, and the county is just getting started. So I'll be really curious to see how the county sets theirs up. Last thing I'll say is, and I'm sure you studied this too, and Ms. Wolf from the federal workforce, you would know, there was a study that came out a couple of years ago from the GAO around rampant abuse of teleworking privileges in the federal government. So I was really pleased that you saw us in compliance with all those 10 controls, some opportunity to strengthen it. But I think that's some of the concern that supervisors have now. Will we get as much out of someone if they're teleworking, and understanding what teleworking is? It's not an opportunity to flex your hours. It's an opportunity to not come into work. And so there's some education that we have to do on that. So there's a lot of thoughts that I have on this, and we can certainly do more in the area of communication going forward.
Judy, did you want?
Well, I was going to say some of the things that I think you touched on. The social aspect, there was another side of it. If they get disconnected from the people that they're working with, that could be a problem if there's too much teleworking, and people don't remember how to work together with other people. But on the other hand, I've heard or read reports that say that the efficiency is really there for people who can do this, and it works well for them because they can sandwich it in between putting the kids to bed or whatever they have to do.
Right, everyone we interviewed who teleworked at MCPS was positive about it and said that it helped them be more productive, that they weren't spending so many hours in a day commuting. Some of them really appreciated that they had a quiet environment they could concentrate in. And they all said that it was valuable to be able to come into the office for, it might be a weekly meeting. They all wanted to have some contact with the people they worked with also, and it was good for the productivity of the office also.
I appreciate what you said, Dr. Zuckerman, because the one thing we did find in the federal government, it was very important for people to identify what, allergies, what they were going to produce at home. So we had an expectation when you came in the next day that this is what you were going to bring, that you had completed, or you had worked on it to a certain point, and it's a continuation product. So that was one thing that we definitely beefed up that was very helpful. And it also makes the supervisors feel a little less anxious if they know exactly what it is that you're going to deliver to them. But it's interesting, the social aspect, what we found where I was is that a lot of people, they liked teleworking if they had something to read, but they missed being at work. So a number of them started out wanting 3 days, and they reduced it because they actually missed coming into the office.
The camaraderie. Yeah, and the work in the office, yeah.
Now, sharing ideas, which
Yeah.
you can't really. I've been here a long time, but it seems to me that we did not have all this information about our board meetings on computer. We had paper that was delivered to us on Fridays usually, or days before. Is that right, Becky? Yeah, I thought that's what, we've improved.
Okay.
I would also like to see you identify any other positions that might be eligible for working at home. I don't know whether you received any information as you were interviewing people about potential positions, but I think that is something we ought to look at.
We can do that. And I think it speaks to what Ms. Dixon was saying around communication, because our process is such that employees essentially apply each year. And there's a very low, I don't have the numbers here, I don't know if you know Molly or Lance, it's a very low, it's a very high approval rate, rather,
Okay.
for people who, so it's for people who want to, the opportunity is available. Again, it's dependent on the position in terms of what lends itself more to teleworking. But yeah, we can look to see if there are positions that maybe could be eligible or more appropriate for telework where people haven't necessarily applied, and we can do that.
Great. Okay, so I don't have any further questions. I'd like to thank you both. And actually, I would like to meet with you sometime to get to know you. And once again, congratulations.
That'd be wonderful.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right, we are now at 3.2, the report on the Independent Activity Fund Committee. That's Miss Diamond. How are you?
Well, thank you.
Good.
So as I get the PowerPoint pulled up, as you recall, there we go. At this committee and at a variety of other places, we have talked about taking some time to look at the Independent Activity Fund. There are a couple of reasons this has come up. Just to give you a brief context, there have just been questions related to the equity of access to the funds in these accounts. There have been questions around things such as field trips, around the cell tower funds, around being able to do what a school wanted to do for their staff in terms of staff appreciation, in terms of organizing the school and being able to do what they wanted to do for students. A little bit of context as well around what the Independent Activity Fund is. So as you know, the operating budget, the one that the Board of Education moves forward, is around our tax and non-tax funding that we get from our county government, from our state, as well as from our federal funds. In addition to that, we have other grants, and those together make up our operating budget. We also have a capital budget, which the board approves each year. In addition to that, schools have a separate account. These are dollars that the school generates through a variety of different activities. It could be fundraising, it could be school events, it could be things happening on the school grounds. So sporting events, drama, they generate their own funds, and these funds go into something we call the IAF, or Independent Activity Fund. So different schools have different amounts of funds that come in. Later this morning, you will hear about a report that is done by your auditing office on those funds. There's a yearly report as well as the individual audits. And what we're going to share today is about a committee we brought together just to look at how equitable these funds are distributed in terms of school by school and the access that schools have to these funds. Keep in mind, we do not control the allocation of these funds. These are generated at the school level. Sometimes it's through PTAs and donations, grants and foundations, other means that the school takes on. So with that, let me just start and share with you that in addition to this committee, other groups have come to us and asked us to look at this. The principals organization, MCAP, asked us to take a look at what was going on. We had our Title I principals have brought this up on numerous occasions. Our Education Foundation has brought this up. The MCC-PTA have brought this to our attention. And so lots of interested stakeholders wanted to know how these funds were being used, and so it made a lot of sense to bring this committee together. Our charge was to look and to study the availability and the equitable availability. So we were really specifically focused on how funding that was available in schools impacted the student experience and what those funds did in terms of altering or changing student experience. So were schools, because of the funds they were generating, creating or offering different types of experiences for students? In other words, did it matter which school I went to in terms of the experience I have related to what a school was able to do with an independent activity fund? Or does it matter which school I work at in terms of what a school is able to do because of the funds that are available in their independent activity fund? So the work group, we brought together stakeholders from a variety of sources. We thought it was really important not just to have school staff, which we certainly had. We had principals, we had assistant principals, we had school business administrators, we had central office staff who support schools. But we also brought together some other stakeholders. We brought in the MCC-PTA, we brought in our foundation, we brought in other parent advocates to help us study and look at this together. We held meetings between March and June, and we created some subgroups that did some additional study and looking at data and gathered additional input. So our scope of our study was 7 components we put in place. First, we wanted to review and define the sources of funding. We wanted to understand all the different ways that schools were generating their funds, where were those funds coming from, and how were they getting funds into their independent activity fund. We then wanted to look at how those funds were being used in individual schools. We wanted to look at any board policies or MCPS regulations which impacted, and you'll hear later that we did see at least a few that impacted what a school was able to do in terms of student or teacher or adult experience because of what they had in their accounts. We looked at other school systems to see what they did. We identified potential inequities that existed. We addressed the impacts on schools where those inequities were present, and we identified opportunities for improvement. We won't call these recommendations yet because they're still in the early phases, but we see them as opportunities for improvement for us to consider as a school system. Once we went through the initial phase of the work, through the 7 steps, we decided that there were really 4 areas that we thought were important for us to continue to study for solutions or opportunities for improvement. One was the development or the creation of a central fund. Give you a little context on why this came up. What we discovered is, yes, some schools were able to generate many more funds and dollars in their activity account than other schools. They had foundations, very active PTAs, lots of fundraising, lots of students attending events. For a variety of reasons, those schools had large amounts of dollars in their accounts. And you'll see this in the end-of-year report that the auditors do, that some schools bring in and send out significantly more dollars than other schools. We recognize that those funds were raised specifically by those schools for those schools. And we recognize that the guidelines in terms of fundraising require that if funds were raised for a certain reason, they must be used for those certain reason. So as a solution, one thing we want to look at is the creation of a central fund that schools that don't have the access to the larger amounts of funds can tap into, where these funds can be distributed to those schools so that we don't have an inequity in terms of the experience that can be offered based on what's in these accounts.
Where would that money come from?
So can I answer that question in a moment when we get
Sure.
to a slide? So
Sure.
hold it, and if I don't answer it, I definitely will come back to it. The second is a look at access to field trips. One of the things we discovered in looking at how funds were being used is that as dollars were being collected for field trips, there seemed to be some differences in terms of what field trips were available to students in different schools, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well and what that looks like. We want to look at the cell tower lease revenue. Currently, the board policy allocates that revenue very specifically to our central REM, Real Estate Management Fund, to the school where the cell tower is placed, and to the feeder schools where the cell tower is placed. In some cases, what we find is those dollars are going to schools that already have tremendous amounts or large amounts of funds already coming in. And so we want to bring to the policy committee, and we'll talk about this in a minute, a reconsideration of how should we distribute and make those funds available in a more equitable way and still recognize that a school has the cell tower on their grounds. And the fourth area that we'll talk about is a communication plan. One thing that we recognized in studying what was going on is some of the inequity was more about not knowing what was available or permissible than actually not being able to generate the funds. We found that there was a communication gap where we could do a better job, and we'll talk about this in a minute as well. So there were 4 areas that we dug deeper into in terms of developing some opportunities for improvement. Let me take you through each of those areas. The first one, Ms. Dixon, as you asked, was the development of a central fund. Our idea here and concept here, and many organizations do this, is to create a central fund that would be managed at the central level that would be distributed to highly impacted schools or schools with identified needs. We would look at how we gather dollars in that fund in terms of when and where it was appropriate to use any operating funds in that account, where and when fundraising throughout the district, a certain portion could be voluntarily committed to that fund. And so there are a variety of ways of doing this. We looked at some other organizations, for example, on some college campuses, when they do fundraising for a variety of their funds, there's an option to donate a certain portion of fundraising to a central account. So let's, for example, say, and this is just an example, let's say, for example, we go with a sliding scale where a school that does fundraising commits to 5% or 10% of their fundraising to the central fund. It would be voluntary, so it wouldn't be a mandate, it wouldn't be policy, but it would create and generate the funds. The other way to generate funds is to look at some of the existing policies. So, for example, not saying this would be the direction the board went, the board might determine that some of the cell tower funds, instead of going to the real estate management fund, or instead of going directly to the school or the feeder schools where the cell tower is, might go to the central fund. So we brainstormed a variety of ways to create and develop the central fund. We also talked about the role of our education foundation in terms of fundraising for the central fund, and then and then we would talk about how to manage the central fund. We also talked about looking at the school's year-end balances. So as you know from looking at the year-end reports, some schools end their year in their IAF fund with larger balances. And so we had some questions about if there were larger balances, schools might commit a portion of that to the central fund, again, voluntarily, because the idea from gathering and doing fundraising is you're fundraising for a reason and for an expense, not to create a balance to carry year over year. So it's intended for the use of the students in the school in that year. It might be that you're fundraising for something and you need it the following year, but in the case that it is surplus, we might be able to secure some of those funds for the central fund.
Okay.
The second area we looked at was field trips. We saw some gaps in terms of the experiences students have, because field trips aren't a required part of the curriculum. There are a few field trips, like the Strathmore trip, for example, which is part of the curriculum and it is part of the MCPS budget. But in many cases, there are other field trips that schools go on, and those field trips can be impacted by whether students can secure funds to attend the field trip, although schools are asked to ensure that kids that can't do that are supported by the school's IAF. We felt it was important to create some guidelines, potentially, that would help guide and create some more equity in terms of the experience students have. A student in third grade in one school should not have a significantly different experience than a student in third grade in another school based on field trips and curriculum. And so our recommendations here are about, first of all, looking at can and should we allocate operating funds to support schools with field trips, using a differentiated formula to ensure that schools that cannot afford to do that have access to it, but also looking at what are the sorts of things we should be allocating for all students. Looking at transportation rates and working with our Department of Transportation to see if we can manage and mitigate some of the high cost of transportation. Developing a list of recommended field trips based on the curriculum so that students are experiencing the same curricular activities and opportunities, not depending on their schools. Setting expectations for field trips, that they're evaluated so that we can see, is there return on investment for the dollars we're spending for field trips? And improving our field trip report so that we can do a better job of monitoring. So looking at that report, how many students are attending the field trips, what sort of learning is attached to the field trips, and also what are the expectations related to the field trips. So we had a couple of ideas and thoughts here. Again, this would require bringing a larger stakeholder group together to flesh this out and come up with some recommendations.
Would that need to go to a policy committee, Nikki?
So I do not believe this has anything to do with policy. I think it would have to come back to the board in terms of budget, because I don't believe our policy talks to field trips per se in terms of creating equitable experiences. I do believe the notion of putting dollars in our budget would come back to the board, because we'd come to you with a budget
Right.
for that.
Yeah, the reason I asked that question is, how soon could we get going on this, having a group look at this, make some recommendations?
I think we could do, depending on what you as a board wanted, we could certainly, I think in fact, all four of these recommendations are things that we can move for some pieces of them quickly on. There are components of each that will require some work and planning and impact analysis, but looking at field trips, for example, and sitting down with our curricular team and sitting down with OSSI and looking at, what makes sense and how we can look at the rest of the year, I think is something I'm looking over at Dr. Labat over there and wondering if that's something we can pretty much do right away.
Yes, and to the question around policy, all of these are practices that are part of the current field trip policy. And as Ms. Diamond said, what's really important is that we work together around some of those specifics, around the types of recommendations, but the things are aligned with expectations and the alignment to curriculum are pieces that already exist. So this is really thinking about how do we make a more concrete presentation to schools and provide a means for them to access those additional funds. But it's completely aligned with what our current practices are. It's just providing a structure that is very clearly articulated for schools around how to access funds.
Yeah, one of the things I would like to see all schools do when, talking about field trips is when you have that field trip form, at the end of the form, to put a space there for parents or whoever is signing for their child to go, if they want to make an extra contribution for students who can't afford to go, that really works really, really well. Schools, and in the past, we've been able to raise a lot of funds, especially at the middle school level, whether it was for yearbooks, field trips, and things like that as well. But parents are very generous. And, whether you add $5 more or $10 more, you get, a fund of money as well. So I'd like to make that a formal suggestion that, it's a way to access field trips, increase access to field trips.
That was one of the practices we saw going on in many schools. I think what you see is, just as you said, it happens and it can be successful in many schools. It is easier to be successful with that approach when you have a school that isn't highly impacted. A school where you are talking 60, 70, 80% of the students are impacted, it is more difficult to do because you don't have as many people who are able to make those additional donations. The other piece is that we feel like that makes sense when there's a small number of students that may need support. We want to look at a more systemic approach as well on top of that. Are there operating funds? Are there other things that we should be doing to support?
Yeah, no, this would be in addition to those other things. And, and I kind of disagree with you a little on this because you never know what one person, one parent may want to give, and certainly I would call, the middle school that I was principal of, impacted, and the parents were very generous. So I just think you don't know.
Absolutely, and we want to look at all different ways to try to support our students and look, centrally as well.
I have a question.
Oh, of course.
The develop a list of recommendations for curriculum-based field trip enrich. I really like that. I think there should be a base level that all kids can expect. My question is it too late to do that for this school year? I mean, I don't know when trips are planned out, whether or not you have to give your list at the beginning of the school year. What would be the expectation there?
That's a great question. Field trips are planned and scheduled throughout the year. Our Office of School Support and Improvement, manages that process. And so it's certainly not too late. It's never too late to put that type of information in front of schools as they're planning for the year. And certain curricular topics that are scheduled throughout the year. So I think it's the earlier the better, but it's certainly something that we'll start working on sooner rather than later, so that schools have that information.
Yeah, I was just going to say then I would like for you to come back and be able to report what you could agree on with that. And also I want to support Ms. Dixon's comment. I think that adding that little box at the end would be very helpful because just because a school might be 80% farms, there's always that extra 20% who might be a lot more generous than you think.
Absolutely, we'll take that suggestion. And you can see from the last bullet, we had some suggestions in terms of improving our forms and our reporting mechanisms. So we have the data as well, and we will do that. So our third area where we looked at an opportunity, you see, doesn't have a lot here because this is really, it's a consideration for the policy committee. The policy was written some time ago. It was written when the dollars coming in were nowhere near as significant as they are now, and we weren't in the same place as we are right now. And so it's just a consideration to bring to the policy committee to adjust that distribution. The policy is exact in what it says. It basically says 1/3 of the monies coming in will go to the real estate management fund. 1/3 of the money will go to the school on which the cell tower resides, and 1/3 of the money will be distributed to the feeder schools of that school. So it eliminates some schools completely from receiving those funds. Some schools that need the funds receive the funds, and then there's some schools where one could argue from looking at the data, there's significant funds sitting in their balances each year, and the additional funds don't necessarily serve that school in a way. And so we just would bring to the policy committee and to this committee the idea that maybe that should be studied differently and reconsidered.
I have a question about that. I think that you said a little earlier that some of the feeder schools might be schools that didn't really need it. But as I recall the presentation on this, and it was a while back, so, I might not remember correctly. I thought that most of these cell towers, I remember asking, they seem to be on heavily minority schools. So the feeders, what feeder schools wouldn't need it?
So some are, some are and some aren't. And I think that's just the question of, we are not recommending taking funds away from schools that the board or others believe need those funds. There certainly, though, are some schools that may not need those funds. There's a question of the large amount that's distributed. Should it be more equally distributed between other schools that don't receive any funds? Does it make sense to take a third of it and keep it in the real estate management fund to support central functions, or should we be budgeting for those central functions with our operating dollars? I think those are all questions for you and for our policy committee in terms of us looking to create more equitable experiences for students. We thought that would be a conversation that you would want to have. But as you pointed out, Ms. Wolf, there are schools that need those funds and use those funds. And I think one of our questions just was, are there places that we're allocating the funds where we don't need to be, or could be looking at those funds in a different way?
Was the cell phone tower lease, is that policy? I mean, does the lease include the idea that the school is getting the money and that the feeders, is that in the lease, or is that a policy that you can just change?
It's in the board policy.
Okay, thank you.
And so last, and again, this is one that we already are starting working on, but certainly would love some more input or feedback on this. We recognized as we met and reviewed the data that there was just a lot of misunderstanding, and there was room for communicating better about what funds were available and how we could use those funds. We had schools telling us, well, we didn't know we could do that. We didn't know that was available. And so the last area for improvement was to create a better communication plan, provide more input, more communication to schools on what was available. We would have a document that would be available to all schools showing all the different sources of funding they have, whether they be operating or otherwise, and how they can use those funds, what's allowable, what's not allowable, what regulation says, what state policy says, what we are allowed to do with those funds. And then provide more information about MCPS on the MCPS grant page, and more information on our business page on what grants are available to schools. There's small grants and large grants that are available to schools, and some schools are really very good at accessing those grants and tapping into them, and other schools don't even know they're available. And we take responsibility for maybe doing a better job and making sure schools know what's available to them. So if they do want to apply to receive funds to run this activity or another activity, or to do something different in their school, that would be available. One thing I want to emphasize here is we don't see this area as an excuse not to do the other work in the other areas. We still think we want to look at how we're allocating funds and making funds available, but we want to do a better job in terms of communicating and letting schools know what's already out there.
I have a question.
Sure.
You're going to provide information on MCPS grants.
On the grants
webpage.
Yes.
But, writing grants is a skill. So do you have somebody that can help with that? Because a lot of our schools, they're already overburdened with things to do during the course of a day. So do you have somebody that they could turn to help with that?
So most of we call them small grants. Most of the small grants that are out there, and we have a web page we've already created, don't require the sort of grant writing that you and I think about when we think about grant writing. For the larger big grants that we think about, we try to work centrally through each of the offices to write those grants. These small grants are little things where, like, the city of Gaithersburg might be offering stipends to run, and in fact they do, after-school programs, and it's a form that a school fills in where they say what they're doing. It's maybe 2 or 3 lines. They indicate how they're using the funds, and they just need support, calculating a piece, and we try to work with them on those pieces. For the larger grants, you're absolutely correct, and we try to help with. We do all the writing centrally on the biggies. So I don't know if there are any other questions or discussion points. I certainly can talk about some next steps and hear your thoughts on what you think we need to be moving on more quickly.
Dr. Duckett, did you have anything?
No, I think there's a section in there about staff when they're raising funds, how they have to build a budget. A lot of times they don't, and they don't have the loss and gains items there, and that they need to turn in their stuff every day and not hold on to it. But those are things that I think you have in the policy and in the practices. We need to emphasize that a little bit more.
I had
Yeah,
a
go ahead
comment.
then.
This is just a comment. If your goal is equitable availability, I think you need to move on all of it quickly. But my question would be around the central fund. I can imagine there could be some pushback on that. So in terms of looking at that further, what's the timeline on that?
So I think one of the things we did strategically well here was bring in a lot of stakeholders, those that were going to be involved. MCC-PTA has been a leader in this thinking. And so this is not a kind of top-down, let's tell MCC-PTA what we think they need to do as they're doing fundraising. They've been intimately involved, and in fact, some could argue they had the idea before we even had the idea. They wanted to push on this. The foundation as well, the Ed Foundation, has been talking quite a bit about this notion. So I think we have the right people at the table now. Still, this is a different approach than we've had in the past, and that always causes angst and questions and concerns. One thing that we've talked about as we figure out how to do this, and it is going to take bringing people together to figure out how to do this, is you start something with this voluntarily. You don't force this on, but you create a way to do this that people want to be part of it. They want to be part of the community and part of their thinking that we're fundraising for our school and our students and also for Montgomery County. And so if we change our thinking a little bit, that it's not just here, but kind of like thinking about the whole. And we do have some work to do. It's going to take a little time to create the structure. And how do you manage such funds? How do you decide where and how those funds get allocated to the schools and the places that might need it? Do you do this by formula? Do you do this by application? If it's done by application, who's going to manage that, and how will that be done? So I'm not saying there is no work, but I do think we've done a little preliminary work by having the right people at the table to think about this and consider how to get it done.
Well, let me just say that some of these things, of course, you can move a little quicker than others, such as the, looking at going to curriculum to see about the field trips, a communication plan so that people know what's available, and you can look at the cell tower. I don't know how quickly you could look at that if it's policy. Mm-hmm. But I would like to get some idea of when we should expect some report back, or when you think you could report back, because if we're talking equitable availability, and we've been talking about this at least since I came on the board, and I will say kudos to MCC-PTA, because I went to a meeting almost 2 years ago where they were talking about this. I think it's imperative that we see some movement fairly quickly.
We appreciate that, and we would 100% agree with you. Why don't we, I'm just looking over to Dr. Zuckerman. We certainly need to bring people together to start doing some planning. I would think that we could give you a report on where we are with the planning. There are pieces of this that are budget that say, should we and can we allocate a piece of the budget to do X, Y, and Z? Could we do small scale small steps in this year's budget and then move forward in terms of developing and adding to our budget for next year, certainly. And so we'd have to look about where we could free up resources because we don't budget a separate account, right? So it has to come from somewhere, and we'd have to look and say, what can we not do if we want to do some of these pieces? But why don't we plan on coming back to you, Dr. Zuckerman? What makes sense in terms of an update to them?
I don't think we can come back in October. I think it'd have to be the following meeting. I agree, we need to move quickly. I also was thinking just of the policy component and how that timeline, that there's a process and that takes some time. So I think we need to look at what is a policy piece of this, what's a budget piece of it, what's a practice piece. And I think my recommendation is we come back with a plan that lays out those different aspects of it so we understand the timeline and trajectory of each.
Okay, so November? Good.
Well, we have a meeting October 30th, and then our next meeting I don't think is until January.
Okay, how about January?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just one question though, and this is just because I don't know the answer to this. On the access to field trips, that really has concerned me. I don't know which level goes on the most field trips, but I noticed that the IAF report didn't include elementary schools. So how do we, what are we looking at there? Because that means we don't have any idea of the money that's available. I mean, I could look at the high school report and see that some of our high schools have this much money and some have this much money. But I have no idea what you're talking about when you start sort of coming up with a plan for elementary schools.
And it really depends on some of it depends on the schools themselves. What we've observed, and a lot of this year we've revamped some of our processes. We've done some process improvement based on the types of questions that are asked and how you as a board have been engaging around field trips for the last couple of years. So it's helped us to redefine some of our processes. So some of those things in the last bullet were recently updated to the process for this year. And I'm thinking off the top of my head, there seemed to be probably a balance of field trips in elementary. We can definitely provide that for you in an update by level where field trips are occurring. But there's also the type of field trip. And so we may have secondary students who may go more to external field trips, whereas we provide those in-school field trips more often in elementary school. So they're still having those opportunities to engage and interact, and they're having guest speakers, and they're having scientists come and do experiments with them. But to manage that process, part of it because of supervision, part of it because of cost, it becomes more cost effective to provide those experiences in elementary schools. So I would say there are probably more experiences at the elementary level, but they are probably more leave the campus, go somewhere when we get to secondary. And of course, the cost shift from elementary to secondary, but we can certainly provide you that information across all three levels.
Well, that would be helpful because whatever it is that's going on in elementary school, whether it's they're bringing somebody in or whether they're actually taking them out, it needs to be equitable. So I would like to take a look at, I mean, certainly if you're bringing somebody in, you should be bringing in that same experience to every school. And if you're actually taking them out, that too should be available at every school. But as we know, we have a lot more elementary schools and a lot more situations where more funds would be needed at a number of them. Thank you.
Right. Yeah, I'd like to just follow up. I think it was a couple of years ago, time escapes me, that I had the opportunity to visit the Maryland State House and, talked about field trips for the fourth graders as they're studying Maryland, going to the State House, which is really very historic, and it's where George Washington, resigned his commission and so forth, and it's a beautiful State House. And I think I may at the time have suggested that might be something that, elementaries might want to do in terms of their fourth graders. I'd really like to know how many of our fourth graders, when studying Maryland, get an opportunity to go to the Maryland State House. I think it's really important for our students to be able to maybe envision themselves as a member, of the General Assembly in Maryland, and just in terms of the laws for the state and things like that. So if we could maybe just find out, maybe just send out something to the elementary principals. How many of you, your fourth graders go to the Maryland State House? Would be interesting to know.
And we'll definitely follow up on that. And just along those same lines, I wonder if it would be helpful, because it's aligned with that third bullet, and maybe Ms. Steele will be my partner in this. There are some recommended field trips, at fourth grade. There's some at second grade or fifth grade. But just getting a sense not only of those that go to the Maryland State House, but what are some of those options? Because, as my last child is now in junior in high school, but I remember in elementary school, the experience that the two younger children had, who were only 2 grades apart at fourth grade, were different. So some of that, shifts depending on the school and what's an emphasis that year, but certainly we can follow up specifically around Maryland State, but some of those exist and recommended at certain grade level, because my sense is there will be other options other than the State House, but around the government itself.
Right, great. And then just, kind of coming full circle, initially we were looking at the IAF because I had concerns about whether schools, specifically high schools, had enough funds, to be able to, celebrate their staff, or, do things in terms of food and, these shirts and, other gizmos that they give away. So where do we stand on that? Do they feel, and that came really out of, talking with some high school principals as well, but do they feel they have enough money, the allocation per staff member right now?
So you'll recall, we did a survey and we asked them. And so what we found in the survey, if you remember, is schools that had more money wanted the number of dollars to be increased. They wanted to be able to spend more. Schools that had less money said, I don't want the number to be increased because I don't have the money to spend more. But if you give me more money, I'd like the number to be increased. So I think the question you're asking is kind of the broader question is, first of all, do they have enough money to do what they feel they need to do to support their staff?
Right.
And I think the answer to that is some do, and some wish there were more. And then the second question is the MCPS guideline of putting a limit on how much we spend on staff appreciation appropriate? And I think we have to first address that first question of making sure people have enough, because the people, when we looked at how people were spending their money and were they actually meeting the guideline, there was a large group of schools that were not even spending what the maximum was because they didn't have it to spend. And so this is how the schools look. Some were spending it, some were not. If we increase the amount, these schools weren't going to go anywhere. They didn't have any more money. All we would do is create the gap between the haves and have-nots. So before we change our guideline and say you can spend more, we got to get more money here to these people, or else we open the gap.
Well, that, though, depends on the principals and what they, want to do with and for their staff. If they want to do more, somehow they, I think, would raise more funds. But, let's say take a huge school like Blair, just in terms of the large staff that they have. What is the amount now? Do you remember? That they can spend per staff member?
What were you saying, Andy? I thought it was, we had it at one point at 65, I thought. I have to look, I don't want to misquote it. Let me find out what it is and get it back to you.
Okay, yeah, I think it is at, let's say 65. So if that's not enough, for a larger school, and I realize that, if schools spend over that they can, get an exemption from the chief, is it you or the chief operating officer? But I think that that's really important, that they have what they need to be able to celebrate their staff, because, you have the other pieces then as well. If you're not nice to people at the school, they may leave, go someplace else, and, where they feel appreciated. And I think it's really important, that we appreciate and celebrate staffs, and that principals, they're going to be spending, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on this, but should have, I think, the discretion to be able to do the things that they want to do for their staff.
And we absolutely agree, we want to be able to do the things we need to for our staff. And just like our students, we don't want the experience of working in a school to depend on where that school is and who the students are in that school. At the same time, we want to make sure that in terms of auditing and all those rules and regulations out there, that we spend money in the way that it was raised. And so we want to make sure they have the right amount of money, that they're not tapping into money that was specifically raised to do X, to do Y. And I know that's how you feel as well. So we want to be able to figure out, how do we make sure that schools have what they need to meet the needs of their students and their staffs, and to ensure that the experiences both student and staff have are not different and not dependent on the demographics in the school. So we absolutely agree with you.
So if you could get back to us just on, how schools feel about this. Do they have enough money? That'd be great.
Sure, we'll bring
Okay.
you some of that data back.
Right. Okay. Great. Anything else, ladies? No? Okay. Thank you, Nikki. You want to keep going? All right. We are on Category 12, expenses. And if you could just review for us and those watching what Category 12 expenses entail. That'd be great.
I absolutely will. So a little context on what Category 12 is and what this report is about. So Category 12 is otherwise known as fixed charges. Category 12 are benefits. The two largest portion in our Category 12, and when we talk about categories are, if you look at our operating budget, we are required by the state, and this is how we are allocated our funds, we are allocated them within categories. So when we receive our entire budget, we receive pieces of it in each category. Category 3 is all instructional salaries. Category 4 is all materials. Well, Category 12, there's categories all the way up to 12, so I skipped them. Category 12 is what we call fixed charges, or there are benefits. When you receive your funds, you can move money within the category, but you can't spend outside of the category. So the Board of Education can't take $20 million that was put in Category 12 and say, oh, we want to do something in Category 3. We would have to go back to our county council, and we'd have to say, we need to make a categorical change. We need to move money from one category to the other. And so every year, since 2012, we send a report to our county council, and that report goes twice a year. It goes in March and it goes in September, and it's an update on the category and where we are. And so today we're here to share with you the letter that we've drafted. It has to go from the board president to the county council, so we send it by September 30th, and we just wanted to share with you what that letter says and what's required of that letter. And so the requirement of the letter is to share both around the strategy the school system has in working with the items in Category 12, as well as the current status of Category 12 from the previous year. And in the March letter, it's where category stands at that given time. And so what you see here is directly from the letter and what's shared. And we talk about our strategy in the letter as well. So active employee insurance, group insurance, is healthcare. Fancy name for it. We budget for healthcare. Remember that our employees also pay a portion. They pay an amount. They pay an amount, approximately 14% of the total cost comes from the employees. And so you see the actual amount compared to the budget. FICA, is the Federal Insurance Contribution Act. It is the amount of money we pay to the federal government based on salaries. It is calculated based on what we think the salary base is. And again, you can see our budget and the actual amount we spent. Retirement is the retirement, the cost of that the school system has to put from the operating budget into the local and into the state, we call it the shift. It used to be covered by the state, and now the local part pays the normal cost of the retirement, not the unfunded liability, and you can see there our retirement costs. The increase in the actual has to do with the strategy that you as Fiscal Management Committee and our Board of Education put in place, actually reiterated last year, which is that we would continue to fund at a higher level until we reach the 90% funded ratio. We had dropped below the 90% funded ratio when the retirement plan changed, and so we continue to move to fund that until we get to that 90% rate. The retiree group insurance is retiree health care, and our non-tax supported grants is the benefits we have to pay on grants. So when we get a grant, we have to pay the benefits separately, and you can see we have to budget for that as well as keep track of that separately. We also keep what we call risk management or self-insurance. We do this with the county, and we budget for that each year. And we budget for tuition reimbursement. Tuition reimbursement is part of the contract, so we can't budget and hold steady at the budget. If someone submits for tuition reimbursement and they meet the criteria, we have to pay. And so you see there's a place that we budgeted and went over because we had more requests than we had dollars. And then the miscellaneous area is where we keep some of the smaller accounts. This is everything from tuition forgiveness, the emergency child care fund, the conversion of annual leave. In June of each year, our 12-month employees are allowed to convert some of their annual leave that they haven't used into dollars that can then go into their tax-deferred annuity. We have to fund that because we don't they're not actually giving us dollars, they're giving us their leave days, and so we have to keep an account for that. And so you can see the amount we budgeted and the actual amount there. The reason that's come in a little lower, and we've adjusted for that in FY20, was we had fewer requests in that area than we had in the past in terms of conversion. And so the letter is ready to go. We just wanted to see if you had any questions, and if you wanted any additional information provided in the letter beyond kind of the facts that we have provided you today.
Ladies? No? We're good?
Okay, great.
Okay. And I think you are on a roll.
I am.
You're up to
I'm going to invite
5.1,
our
the Central Investment Fund.
I'm going to invite Rob, our Director of Financial Services, to join us.
To see you. This is Rob Riley.
This is Rob Riley, and he is our director. Rob, you've been with us for 2 years now, right?
Yep.
And he's been doing some great work. You heard about the change in revenue last year of over $1 million because of a renegotiation for our bank account. That was the work of Rob Riley and his team. So today he's here, and he's going to share with us a little bit around the Central Investment Fund investment earnings.
So I want to talk about that investment earnings, but before that I want to kind of go into a discussion of our policy, of the board's policy objectives. So your objectives are pretty standard when it comes to operating fund investments. The policy talks about legality. So by legality, we don't want to do anything that's outside the law, no derivatives, no investing in certain countries. So this is the legality part of the objectives. Safety of principle speaks to we don't want to lose any money. If we're investing, obviously we have to make payroll, so we don't want to lose money. So we got to keep that principle safe. Same thing with liquidity. We want to be able to invest funds, but we also want them available for payroll and for different things that come up. So we've done a good job on those over the last 10 years. The last item is maximum return. So this is an area where we kind of needed improvement, and I want to kind of tease out that definition. So it says, investment shall be managed in a manner to attain a market rate of return consistent with basically the other three items. So when I hear manage, we're talking about cash management, and basically cash management is managing your daily inflows and daily outflows. And our budget is over $2 billion. So at the course of the year, we got $2 billion coming in and out of our fund. So it's kind of overwhelming at first. We do manage, we look at our ins and outs every day. But I guess in my opinion, over the last 10 years, we've had more of a reactive cash management policy rather than proactive. And by that I mean we would request monies from the county or appropriation on an as-need basis, which is fine, but it kind of puts some pressure. It puts some pressure on us, on my staff. When we had a big payroll or when we had to make a payment for pension, we'd have to get that request into the county, and they turn it around timely. But it was basically hard to manage in that fashion. So what I did, something I did in my previous work at Frederick County Public Schools, what we did was we took the county appropriation and basically took that total and divided it by 26 pay periods. What that does, basically, it gives us a standard cash inflow. So when we're managing inflows, we know exactly what we're getting every 2 weeks. The county actually was very happy about that too, because don't forget, on their side, they're managing their cash flow as well too. And when we were hitting them up with, hey, we need $100 million now we need $20 million, it was hard for them to manage and deal with their cash flow. So basically right now, this year, we're taking the $1.7 billion that we're getting from the county, we're dividing it by 26 pay periods, and we're getting $67 million every 2 weeks. And the way it's designed is it comes in 2 days before our payroll. So that kind of question about cash management, it kind of takes the guessing game out of it. We know we're covered for our outlay for payroll. So that's what I'm talking about when I talk about cash management. The other piece of the definition says a market rate of return. So this one's a little tricky. On the next slide, I've given you some interest rates for the operating fund as well as the CIF. So if you look at the operating fund interest rate, what I gave you there was a market rate, which for me, the market rate would be the Maryland Local Government Investment Pool, or MLGIP. At one time, actually, interestingly enough, our CIF was invested in MLGIP. And most counties, localities, and school districts are invested in MLGIP. When I came here, I realized that we weren't. So I realized this is an opportunity. By investing in MLGIP, it meets all of our objectives. It's legal, it's safety of principle, it's liquidity, and by looking at that, you can kind of see it's given us a fair rate of return. If you look down where it says 0.9, that's actually it was the MLGIP rate of return at that time on 6/30/17. But if you look below, we actually didn't earn any interest because we weren't invested in MLGIP. What we were doing at the time was we were invested in our bank, and they were giving us an earnings credit ratio. So what that basically is the bank says, hey, you keep a certain amount of funds in our bank, we'll give you a small amount of interest, and what we'll do is we'll offset fees. But when you dig into the details, it actually wasn't making any money for us. The bank was actually making more money. They got to make money too. They got a bottom line, but it was kind of at our expense, basically. So we were getting a 0.039 earnings credit ratio. Sure, it was offsetting the fees, but we weren't making any money on it. So by negotiating with the banks and by investing at MLGIP, we're able to move that interest earnings from 0 to 1.2 million this year. So that's the story about the operating fund. As for the CIF, it's kind of a similar story. That one, we were at 0.38 in 6/30/17. Through negotiations, we've been able to get that to 1.41%. If you do look, you can see that the operating fund interest rate at 2.39 is well above the CIF interest rate. So there's a reason for that too. Some people might say, hey, why don't we just invest the CIF in the MLGIP and make all that additional income? So for CIF, there's a service that the bank that houses that money does for us. They kind of handle all the different allocations for the schools. So it's a very labor intensive. So some of that money is actually going for that system. And I don't know if you recall, but that's been in place, I don't know, 5 years or so. And it works out very good. The schools, what they do is they take, similar to what we were doing in the operating fund, they'll take their funds and they can kind of move it over to the CIF and earn a decent rate of interest now these days.
Rob, let me, for the public, because I think someone watching this may get confused about the difference, so let me give a little context. I think it would help, and I know the board knows this, but some people might not. All three people who really like the Fiscal Management Committee meetings. The CIF.
We love them.
Not these three, the three watching, right? The CIF, the Central Investment Fund, we just got finished, good timing, talking about the IAF, the Independent Activity Fund. So our schools, and Rob will jump in if I say this incorrectly, our schools have these separate, we call them checking accounts, where they have money coming in and money going out. If during the period of time that they are working and looking at their funds, they want to take a portion of their money in their IAF and invest it for interest or return, they put it into the CIF, which is a conglomerate of all the different schools that put their money into this CIF. So schools put it in there, but money comes in and out all the time. There's a lot of motion there. Little teeny pulls and puts, and so it's very different than the operating fund budget, which you see there, the operating fund interest rate. That's the school system's budget. That's where we pay our $70 million every 2 weeks out to staff. It is a much larger fund as well, and so we don't have as many small movements. We have large movements in and out. And so what Rob is showing you here is really, quite incredible. When he came to work for us 2 years ago, one of the things I asked him about was this notion of our money that sits in the bank and receiving our money on a regular basis. And he said, I can work on this. So if you look at 6/30/17, you can see in our CIF, we were earning in a year $42,000. And in our bank account, in our operating fund bank account, we were earning no dollars. Now, 6/30/19 in our CIF, we now are earning $127,000 a year, and in our larger operating fund account, we are earning $1.2 million in income. So he has been able to negotiate and make some decisions that have significantly impacted the school system's overall budget, because remember, on a monthly basis, when we report to you at financial monitoring, we talk to you about where our budget sits, how much money's gone in, where we sit, and we report to you where we are with revenue. And so revenue, including the money we earn in interest, feeds and serves our budget. And so that's $1 million that now the Board of Education has in its budget to support students. So it's a pretty significant change in our practice, and really appreciate the work that Rob and his team have done to do this, and he continues to look at ways to help us manage our dollars in a way that makes sense for our students.
So also to add on to that, so interestingly enough, the CIF interest earnings are $127,000, but your next presentation, you're going to hear that the actual overall centralized investment fund actually is kind of pretty steady at $10 million. So part of the
What's in it now? 10 million?
Just about 10 million, yeah. So part of the issue is, I kind of went through the process of how we kind of use cash management to move money from our operating into these investment vehicles, right? MLGIP. So the schools basically on a small scale have that same opportunity. I think part of the problem is that they might be concerned about liquidity. So my office manages the in and out of the centralized investment fund dollars too. So if a school needs money, we can kind of get it within 2 days. So we do it on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I guess sometimes it could take 4 days. But I think it's an education process. At the annual meeting, we do tell them that, hey, there's an opportunity for you to earn more money that can go into your coffers, just like we're getting more money.
More than the 1.41, or no?
Well, the interest rate is pretty steady right now. So interest rates went up, but it's pretty steady. But what I'm talking about is moving money from their operating to the centralized investment fund to get not the rate, but the actual amount. So that 127 could actually grow if they're kind of using cash management policies similar to what I was talking about. Now, obviously, they don't have as many resources, and they're shorthanded, and it's just another thing for them to worry about. But the opportunity is there. So at the annual meeting, I do try to kind of explain to them that if you need help doing that, managing those funds to get more interest, my office can help them with that. So.
Any other questions?
Do you have some questions? No. Ms. Wolf? No? Okay. So I do have a question for you, Rob. I received the memo from Dr. Smith in the weekly transmittal, I guess September 5th. Actually, I have the memo with a little note to our new fiscal person who's coming in the board office. But $10 million in the Central Investment Fund. And, you know, I hate that expression, getting into the weeds. But I think we can do better for the schools in terms of, 1.41. And what makes me think of this as well is because we've heard so much as we've, talked about IB tests, AP tests, students who can't afford it, that some of this money could be invested at a higher rate. Just doing a CD, taking some of it out. The schools, from what I do remember, if I took one payment out of the Central Investment Fund as a principal a year, that was it. They're not taking, money all the time. And I think you could get a lump sum in there that would get you more than $127,000, and that some of that money could then be used to help, offset costs for students who can't afford, to pay for some of these tests and things like that. And of course, the field trips could be another thing. Some of that money could go to your central fund. What do you think? I thought this memo was one of those, kind of what I call non-answer answer memos, which just cited, what the policy is in that. But I think that,
It's an excellent point. We did kind of look at, rather than housing all that money in one location, I did mention too that some of that money or some of those earnings are used to offset the priority software that kind of distributes the money. But a portion of that could be, for instance, in the example we're showing, move to MLJIP, earn the 2.39 interest, get that added to the pool of interest.
Yeah, I think that, so I'm going to challenge you to see if you can make some more money for the schools.
We'll take that
seriously
challenge.
with that, because, I just think it's a very low return on a large amount of money. And, I think we could do better. I do.
Is the trade-off in doing that one, as you were saying earlier, of liquidity? I mean, is that that's essentially the trade-off? That
It's like if you have money in your bank account, it's their bank account,
Sure.
right? It's their checking account. And if you were going to put money into a CD or something, you cannot go back and get that money, for a certain period of time. It's the same idea.
Right.
One of the things, but part of this is education, and I think
Sure.
that's something that Rob's done a really good job on, as you saw the numbers. And as Ms. Dixon points out, there's more work to be done, and so we'll take that challenge.
Right.
We want to educate.
These CDs are basically a year, 13 months, some even shorter. And, these funds are just sitting there.
Yeah, that's a great point. The other opportunity too, and I don't think we've done it in many years, is actually go out for a bank bid. That's
Yeah.
another way to put
Okay.
put a little
All right.
pressure on.
So we'll see what we can do. Maybe a year from now, we'll have some more.
Yeah.
We'll be back.
All right. Okay. All right. Thank you, Rob. We are now on 5.2, after-school funding.
So I am going to turn it over to Dr. Labat again.
Well, thank you, Ms. Diamond. So I'm here to provide an update. In the FY20 budget, the board generously looked at some of the extracurricular needs of our schools. We've kind of mentioned that earlier in the conversation when we talked about field trips and other activities at school. And so the allocation for this budget year was to provide $50,000 at the elementary level and $50,000 at the middle school level. So I want to, just for everyone's background knowledge, we currently have in the operating budget funds that go specifically to middle schools for extracurricular achievement-focused programs. And in that model, the money is allocated in a way that there is money for stipends, there's money for field trips, for transportation, and then contractual money that's provided there as well. And that money is allocated across all 35 middle school, 35 middle schools, 37, 40. 40 for middle
40
schools.
middle schools.
That's correct. So across all 40 middle schools, that money is allocated. So we are providing some level of access for all schools, and that money is allocated in a tiered manner. We look at needs for schools so that we're not just dividing it equally. We're looking at how do we make it a more equitable opportunity and experience for students. So keeping that in mind, with this additional influx at middle and elementary schools, we want to mirror that model. The money in that $100,000 is currently allocated for stipends for extracurricular activities and for, I'm sorry, I'm hearing my laptop ding, for stipends, but also for contractual money. We want to mirror the same process where we have schools have access to the opportunity, but we want to make sure that we are providing that to the schools that are most highly impacted. So we are using a process where we're tiering the schools based on forms, numbers, but we're also in elementary school looking at some of our schools that are most highly impacted through the data for the K-2 at literacy. And we want to really focus that. Imagine there's 40 schools in the middle school, middle schools, but we have 135 elementary schools. And so 50,000 would not go across pretty well. So we want to really look at the schools that are really most data-driven would benefit from that influx. To allocate those funds, we're going to use, like I said, the tiering, but we're also going to have schools, particularly around the country.
So the schools wouldn't apply, tell you what they want to do and apply for a certain amount, or you're going to give them a certain amount?
So a little bit of both.
Okay.
For the stipend piece, we were looking at tiering the stipend piece, but for the contractual piece, really looking at the proposal, because the staffing need to implement is going to be a consistent basis across schools, but it'll be tied to whatever the program design is. If it's more of a contractual need where there's a program that's coming in, they might need more program contractual money and less stipend because part of that program might come with staffing. So we want to make sure that we're balancing that opportunity for schools. So we're thinking the contractual piece is the piece we would really want to see that, as you said, application, a proposal. What is it that you want to do programmatically? Who are the students that you are targeting with that? It's not a grant, but really a proposal. And then having that money available for schools in that manner. And in notification process, we have not notified the schools yet. And as you might have noticed me looking at papers here, we're poised to release this information on September 26th, so that schools will have the information in a timely manner to begin planning.
Okay. All right, great. Dr. Docker? Okay.
I just have one question. On the contractual money, I'm assuming you'll come up with some sort of evaluation process.
Yes, and the current process we use for the larger money we have for the middle school achievement focus, there is an evaluation process, and interestingly enough, it's aligned to the bullets that Ms. Diamond presented earlier around the field trips, and like what is the purpose, what is the intent, and were those goals, achieved at the end of the experience. And we do that currently in monitoring the other allocations that we give to schools, so we want to continue that.
All right. Okay. If you could, let us know maybe in January how that all went and what schools actually were able to access those funds, that would be great.
Thank you.
Okay. Very good. Okay. We are now on the annual report of the internal auditor, fiscal year 2019. this is MJ Berg and Stresser. Bergstresser.
Yes, I am
Right.
currently the acting supervisor for internal audit.
Right.
And I'm here to present the annual report that we did. So basically, internal audit is, we have responsibilities, we broke them into 5 categories, and I will go over each of those individually. But basically, it's the management and coordination of the external auditors, financial and compliance audits and reporting. We do operational audits. We assist the managers and the staff in schools and in offices, and we conduct investigations. So the first one is the management and coordination of the external auditors. Every year, MCPS has external auditors come in to go over our financial statements. So as internal audit, we work with them with the contract and we assist them in these audits. In addition to those, we have some state audits. We have the Maryland state audit that is done every 2 years. We have the Maryland Public School construction program that is to be done every 2 years. And then every 6 years, we have the outside legislative audit that comes in and does that. We also do financial and compliance audit. This is one of the biggest components of our...
The OLA, who does that? The county council does that? Is that who does that?
The external auditors? I mean, the outside legislative audits?
No, I'm sorry, this is a state audit. Never mind. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Okay.
So for financial and compliance, we do all the independent activity funds, which is what Ms. Diamond was talking about, the IAFs at all the schools. Currently, we have 207 schools. We just recently opened our newest elementary school in Clarksburg. We go in and we look at various things within the independent activity funds. Do we have internal controls? That's number one. How are the funds being spent? Are they being done correctly? Do we have approvals? We look at field trips. We look at their fundraising, athletics, all aspects of the IAF activity funds. Last year, we conducted 113 audits just of the IAF. And as you heard earlier, total schools as of June 30, 2019 had $15.1 million in their IAF. And again, some of that is in their checking account, and $10 million at this point is in the CIF. And we have, out of the 207 schools, currently 200 schools are participating in the CIF. So obviously we have some schools that we still need to encourage. Snowden Farms, obviously, we wouldn't expect to have one because they just opened. But that is one of the things when we come in to do an IAF audit, we look at what they have, what are their needs, and encourage them routinely to put money in the CIF to, again, get more funds that they can use to support their students. We also audit the centralized investment fund once a year, and we also assist in consolidating all the school financial information into the MCPS Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, which they call the CAFR, that Rob Riley's office pulls together. So we do all that. At the end of the year, every school sends us their financial information. We review it, we look at it, and then we put it together in a spreadsheet. This is just an idea of the independent activity funds where we look at the receipts and the disbursements. And as you can see, obviously high schools have a lot more funds to deal with compared to, say, our special schools. But consistently, they're spending a little bit more than what they're bringing in, but it's, they're keeping in with spending what they got. So that's a good thing. This is just a chart of high schools. As you can see, some schools bring in a lot more money than others, but consistently they're trying not to overspend what they're bringing in. And then this is just, again, on the middle school, the same information. And as you can see, some have more, some have less. Operational audits, we do payroll audits, we audit the cell tower, and student parking. Payroll, as you know, is a very large expense for MCPS, and we try to go in and we try to make sure, do we have internal controls? Do we have separation of duties? Is someone really reviewing and making sure that people are reporting their time correctly? We look to make sure if they have time and effort that that's being done correctly. The cell tower, we just make sure that the schools got the money and they receipted it properly and that they dispersed it to their feeder schools as they were supposed to. As far as student parking, we just want to make sure that we have accountability for the parking tickets that they were issued, sold, and then they return them to our office. And we do a reconciliation to make sure that all the funds have been accounted for. Assistance, this is one of the biggest things that we like to do. We assist in updating the financial manual. We do Chapter 6, which is auditing, internal control, and employee ethics. We do Chapter 7, which is cash handling, and Chapter 20, which is the IAF. So we make sure that everything is up to date, and we work on that. We do a physical inventory testing at the bus depot. We randomly select items to make sure that the inventory is correct, and we also measure the fuel there. We work on the independent activity accounting software. We use an accounting software we call SFO. So they get updates, so we test the updates before we send it out to the schools to make sure that everything is working properly. And then there's just our miscellaneous assistance. We get numerous phone calls, emails, asking questions. We also sit in on the school finance training. We do a part 1 that's mandatory for all principals every 3 years, and then we do a part 2 that the financial agents must come to. So we have a part 1 and a part 2, and we break it out, and someone from my team is always there to assist. Anything else that we need to do to help the schools, that's the most important thing, is, you know, they feel that they can come to us and ask questions, and we're here to help any way that we can. I was asked to do a slide on our investigation escalation policy. We don't really have a policy written out, but it's pretty much known how we do this. Starts out that a school or an office, if they have any concerns for financial payroll, that they reach out to us, and then I will send someone out, and we will look into the situation, and we will report our findings to the person that reported. We also have a hotline that we can get some things from. If we find that there's an issue and it's warranted, then we will contact the Department of Compliance and Investigation, and they will take that to the next step. And once that investigation is done, that gets reported to the superintendent. So last year we did 8 audits outside our normal. So every year we have 25 high schools. We audit every high school every year. We have 40 middle schools. We audit them every 18 months. And we have 135 elementary schools, and we audit them every 3 years. We also come into a school when we get a new principal. So every time we get a new principal, we either come in and do an audit, or if it has not been too long since the prior audit, we will come in and discuss the findings and go over and make sure that everyone is aware of what we had seen. At this point right now, just in the past 2 weeks, we've been asked to look into 3 different situations. One, an employee used the school's MasterCard. One, we may have some funds that did not get deposited, and then we have a payroll issue. So we're always there. If anyone sees anything, we're more than willing to come in and do what we can to help them. So that is all I had. I didn't do a last slide, sorry. But are there any questions or comments that you have for us?
I just have one question, just on procedure. So when you do an audit of the IEF funds and they do a corrective action plan, does the monitoring of that plan, it doesn't occur until next year when you go back?
So what we encourage is that when we have a exit conference with the school, we write out in detail, far more detailed than the audit report that you see, of what we've seen and our recommendations for each area. And we recommend that they pull that out and that the school principal monitors that and the action plan with the financial staff, that they take ownership of that to make sure these were our audit findings, how are we addressing them, where are we at with them, instead of putting it aside for 3 years or a year and a half. So we encourage the principals to take ownership with the financial people to look at that. When we do a follow-up audit, we will look at their action plan. And we will look to see how were you going to address this issue? Did you address it? Maybe you got half of it done. How can we help you to further address it?
But that would be every year when you go back, let's say in the case of a high school.
Yes.
So if I develop a corrective action plan, it's going to be a year before you check to see if I'm actually doing it? That's what I'm trying to find out.
Yes, as far as internal audit, looking at your action plan, it would not be until your next audit.
I wonder, though, if we shouldn't have some sort of interim steps to be sure that something is being done on the corrective action plan.
Thank you. I was trying to get in. I think you have two mics on. So part of those interim steps are that the directors and the area associate superintendents in the Office of School Support, when those audit findings come forward, they are working closely with the audit office, but also with the principals, and that's where that monitoring is occurring. So it's not a wait for a year or for 3 years. There is someone sitting there over the shoulder to make sure that they are in compliance, and that if there's training needed or other supports needed, that push is also happening.
So can we get any information on whether or not you've done an audit and the next year you're still finding the same issue for those schools that you might be still having the same issue?
Yeah, we do get repeat findings.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking
yeah.
too, and I'd like to get a report on that.
Yeah.
When we do our audit report, at the end of every audit report, we have bullets, and we put in bold that they're repeat. And we have a spreadsheet. I could get you some data on that if you'd like. As far as an example would be, we come and do a school, we have 4 findings, and then we indicate how many of those findings are repeats. So I do have that data for that, and I can get that to you if you'd like.
And
Could
what
you do that?
happens when there's a
Absolutely.
repeat? What happens if there's a repeat?
We come in and we do an audit and we find that we have repeats. We may ask that the director attend the meeting, or perhaps even actually call the meeting.
Yeah, they may be sent to financial training also. But yeah, if we could capture that to follow up with the repeat findings number. And also, I think your point, well, it escapes me now, but you had another point which I think would be good to have Mr. Marbella look into. I know, the escalation pieces of all of that would be good also. So if we could capture both of those, that would be great.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking on this task and, continuing in Mr. Pisha's retirement. We appreciate that.
Absolutely.
And, we'll go from there.
It's an
Thank you.
important thing.
Yep, thanks. We are now on 7.1, the Board Expenditure Report for fiscal year 2019. Do you want me to just handle that? Okay. So, do you have questions about the Board Expenditure Report, Dr. Daka? Ms. Wolf? I did want to mention one thing specifically, though, about the Board Expenditure Report. I noticed in reading, the Twitter, that there was some concern about the MPIAs and who we were charging and not. And one of the letters at the bottom said, because I think folks asked, the Bethesda Beat asked for, the board's credit card spending and the superintendent's and so forth. And that's another issue with whether we should charge. We do want to look into that. But I did want that writer to know that the Board of Education does not have a credit card. There are 8 of us. None of us have credit cards because they said, well, why don't we just give them, our credit card receipts? We don't have any receipts to give because we do not have credit cards. I think, people know that, we had a little investigation a few years ago, and that was one of the results of it. So just wanted to make that clear. Okay. All right. Any new business, final comments, questions? No? Okay. All right, so we want to then note that our next meeting will be October 30th, 2019 at 10, and we can adjourn, right? Okay, very good. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.